My guest today is Professor Zahir Ali, and the occasion why we have called him here is Sunita Williams and the Crew 9 astronauts' homecoming. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you very much for having me. It's my pleasure to be on.
Okay. Now, my pointed question to you, Professor Ali, would be now SpaceX and NASA. NASA, probably there was a delay, and the last Dragon capsule that actually was supposed to bring the astronauts back home could not do. So Elon Musk has now stepped in, especially after Donald Trump's, we can say, a global promise that we'll get the astronauts back home. So where do you see this war, this SpaceX versus NASA? Where is it heading now?
SpaceX owes its existence to NASA and the Department of Defense of the American government. SpaceX is a commercial company, and they're providing a service. They are currently the only capability that's truly reliable to deliver people or stuff to orbit, to the International Space Station, or really anywhere off-world that America and its allies have access to. Now, of course, there is this discussion. What is NASA going to do next? And the answer to that is NASA is going to manage missions, some of which will be carried out either completely or in part by SpaceX, Blue Origin, Rocket Lab, Relativity, almost certainly not Boeing, given their failure to perform. What the fundamental question is, what is the next great mission for NASA? Because going back and forth to the ISS on a routine basis is now, it's still challenging, obviously, but it's not that different from driving a truck back and forth to a warehouse. And that's not something the government needs to do. That's something a commercial business should be doing. And if the government needs that service, they buy it from them. And that's the situation we have now. So I believe what you're going to see happen next is that NASA and SpaceX are going to work together to go to Mars. NASA has had many challenges with the Space Launch System. That was a politically motivated rocket. In many ways, many of us believe Artemis should have been designed around SpaceX and Blue Origin and their capabilities, rather than being another rocket NASA built. So for the future, just like NASA doesn't have its own trucks that ship equipment from Ames to Florida. Ames is in California, and going to Florida for launch is all the way on the other side of the country. That same way, NASA should not be building rockets unless they're purely experimental, right? Because there is a reliable service that's going to do this for them. What I believe is going to happen is that there's going to be a closer partnership between NASA and SpaceX to go to Mars and to colonize the moon, both of which will happen, I believe, in our lifetimes. And NASA and the US government and the Western governments in general will not be able to do this without SpaceX, Rocket Lab, or Blue Origin. It's going to be the commercial companies that carry the people and the equipment.
It's going to be the commercial companies that will lead this now, especially when you see Donald Trump announcing a lot of funds cut for NASA as well. So that, I think, probably the private companies step in and then they address the issue. So that you think that will be a norm now, especially with SpaceX, and there are others as well. A few days ago we also saw Firefly sending Blue Ghost to Moon. So you think that opens a whole new game for private companies?
Congrats to Jason Kim at Firefly and his entire team, people like Sam Peterson, who's no longer there, who are instrumental in making that happen. It's a tremendous achievement for a commercial, non-state entity to have successfully landed and executed on the moon. Is really it's a different day in human civilization after that. And what's really exciting, I just want to mention one thing. Over here in the US, we're watching ISRO very closely, and what the government in India is doing to commercialize so many of the technologies out of ISRO. I personally believe that there's going to be a tremendous age of enlightenment around space, and that because India is moving towards a commercial space sector parallel to what ISRO's doing, that they're going to be able to participate in a way that it's going to be India, it's going to be US, it's going to be a very select few companies who are truly willing to to promote their commercial sectors and let them take the lead in space. And that is one thing that the current administration in the U.S. is very sharp on. The people are. It is very frustrating to watch certain decreases in funding, projects that I personally believe in related to science. But overall, I would expect spending to increase on space assets, and space exploration in this administration. The cuts may be in one area, but there will be increases in another, and it's going to be very exciting.
Do you also see now, you have touched upon a very important point here. Do you also see SpaceX now partnering up with Indian startups and coming up in Indian space? We have seen Starlink now partnering with Airtel. But do you also see SpaceX now partnering with Indian startups working for ISRO, or were probably working in field of space exploration?
I think that will happen in time. There are two critical regimes of technology control that currently restrict it. One is ITAR, and the other one is MTCR. The latter, Missile Technology Control Regime, classifies the rockets that we send to the International Space Station the same way that it classifies um, Agni or a missile delivery system like that. And so that makes it a challenge. It's
That
a
borders upon
rapprochement.
the defense sector.
Yes, exactly, because it touches defense. But what we will see is increased collaboration, maybe not in launch, but we will see increased collaboration in on-orbit manufacturing. One of my colleagues in the US, Ajay Malsha, he is a very distinguished professor at Purdue. He's probably the top voice in the United States on semiconductor fabrication in space and in space manufacturing. And so applications like that, drug manufacturing, those are the places I believe that developing nations should look to rather than launch. India is an exception. India has the capability, and they're going to continue to increase it, refine it. They're going to have their own. They're going to have their own human spaceflight program. It's going to happen. There's no doubt. But for other countries and India, with its technological capabilities, what you do in space, not just how you get there, is actually where the greatest opportunity now will lie. And that's a place where we can work without a lot of these controlled regimes inhibiting us. And so, what I expect to see is that Western foreign direct investment and Western companies will be looking at India and other nations like India that commercialize their space industry, for great talent, great companies, and great technologies to integrate into their own systems. And so it's going to be really exciting because it's going to push the governments to find ways to work together, even when politically they may be frustrated. They're going to want to take advantage of the economic opportunity, and so I look forward to it.